I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about why you need to consider using a continuous glucose monitor when you're on the fertility journey, especially if you have experienced issues with maybe the embryo is not implanting, maybe you're not ovulating regularly, maybe your partner has DNA damage or DNA fragmentation. And so today's episode, we're talking all about blood sugar, why this is so important, and how a continuous glucose monitor can help you improve the chances of pregnancy success. Let's go. Hey, Boris, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Equally excited to be on it.
Awesome. Can you share about your journey of really how you came to do this work?
Yeah, it started when I was 7 years old boy and I got diagnosed with asthma. It was a severe case and, they put me on the puffers. I was going to all these health retreats, which were kind of like dingy and scary, and I didn't enjoy the process at all. I was told, this is something that's for life. And so I'm battling through asthma. I'm the cool kid. Nobody wants to hang out with me because I'm on the puffers. Something's wrong with that guy. And it was ironic because 2 years later, I was off the puffer playing soccer every day, didn't have asthma diagnosis anymore. I actually went to do the testing, like they test your lung capacity, and it was scoring above other children. And so that was really the first time that I experienced, I like to say 1 plus 1 didn't equal two, because I was trusting all these advisors and doctors, and all of a sudden it wasn't the case that I had this for life. It was really interesting, and it probably sparked a lot of how I am today as a person, because from an early age, I had to question now anything that was told to me, or I would be very inquisitive. And I always like to joke, since I fought off one chronic disease, there should be some life rule where you don't get a second one. And unfortunately, that's not how my life played out, where, like, kind of long story getting forwarded a little bit, sped up, was I then got into my early 20s and I was playing varsity basketball. I was healthy. And then all of a sudden, I dropped 30 pounds in no, 50 pounds in less than 3 months, now that I recall. And I was, people couldn't not react to how I looked, because I went from muscular athlete to a skeleton, and not no words of a lie. That's how I looked. And then, my confidence was down. And so we were doing all these diagnostics, and I got diagnosed with severe Crohn's disease at that time. And it was so bad, just to put into context, my small intestine to my large intestine, like that pathway was almost completely closed due to scar tissue there. And so, eating was I want to say a challenge, but it was beyond the challenge, because food would get stuck in that area, and then I'd be, throwing up for sometimes over 16 hours in a row, because my body would like kind of revolt, and just it didn't know what's going on, right? It's like you just get everything out of the body. Let's just have a level set. And when I got that diagnosis, there was a scary moment in time, because doctors were telling me, hey, we got to schedule a surgery. Everything was on the cards, including we're going to take out your intestines. We don't know what else to do. And so it was my version of get rich or die trying. It was get healthy or die trying. I joke about it now, obviously. In the moment, it wasn't a fun time. But the diagnosis was, again, there's nothing you can do. You just have this for life now, etc. And I was like, hang on a second. I've been down this road before, and there was some other path. And this time I was older and much more experienced. So I decided, look, I'm very agnostic in how I get better. So I'm just gonna hire every doctor there is on earth. And so I had two gastroenterologists, I had a functional medicine doctor, a holistic healer, a Chinese herbalist, I had a naturopath, I was doing yoga and meditation, like going to the gym, like I was doing everything, I was studying Buddhism. I read all the books. And so I was just like, I'm gonna be a sponge, and somehow, some way I'll try to find some path at least, right? And so forward, 3 months later, I went into a pre-ops, meaning pre-operational checkup, and they told me, hey, we've never seen anybody get better as fast as you have in the state that you were from. And so their synopsis was, well, the meds you're on must be working. And I said, yeah, I'm on. So I was on an immunosuppressant at the time, a lower dosage one. And I was like, well, I'm doing all these other things. Like, it doesn't matter. It's you're like a hyper responder to the meds. And I was like, well, that's a weird stance to take, right? And so then they called off the surgery and they're like, we don't actually have to do it. Let's keep going. And so it took a good 2 years of me doing experiments and aggregating data and keeping journals. Uh, I like to say that was the most painful 2 years of my life mentally. People think physically, yeah, but at some point you're just so sick, you're like, that's just how I feel. You kind of just give into it, and it sucks. Don't get me wrong. You feel tired. There's days I wouldn't get out of bed, but my thought process was when I'm trying to make a decision, I'm trying to be as informed as possible because for me, it was a 50-50 chance if I eat something, I end up in the hospital for 16 hours on IVs. And I was like, the more I can avoid that specific scenario, because then it's recovery of 3 days too, right? Like it's not like a 1 day thing and then it's gone. It's a you're dead tired now and there's no food in your body and you're struggling real bad. IVs were the only thing that kept me alive at those moments. And so I like to bring this up that I didn't know what to do, and there was no good way to know what to do. And in fact, having that approach was maybe good, but in a lot of ways bad because every doctor had their different opinion, right? So one gastro would say, let's go on extremely aggressive medication. One would say, well, why don't we start with this other one that's lower dose? One doctor would say you should fast. The other one would tell me I should eat every hour so that the body has something to chew on because I'm so malnourished. And so it's like it's a complete polar opposites. And they're trying their best because they're coming from their expertise and that's the lens they look at everything in. And so when I would go to meetings, it was this whole fiasco because I'm like, here's my notes. Like I had notes from all these other doctors and experiments I'm running. And most of my meeting would be going over what I was doing. And then we would have like 2 minutes at the end to be like, all right, what adjustment are we going to make? Right. And so this was a full-time job, like trying to get healthy and trying to figure out what to do. And that's really where I came from. And so luckily, after those 2 years of trying hard, I again was able to do things that was written off on me. Like I traveled the world, I built businesses, I ate spicy street food from Thailand in Thailand. So with my diagnosis, that was like the extreme no, don't ever do that. So and it was like again, something was up in my last colonoscopy years ago. I did it, showed zero signs of disease, and I'm off all meds. So that was my story getting into health and why I'm so drawn to it because I've had so many issues and so many ways of approaching healthcare, and I've seen it all in it. I wish there was like better solutions when I was in those spots, which led me to where I am today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that that's so many people end up coming to helping others with their health because it's the journey they had with their own. I was
Hmm.
diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency, and I had both my kids with donor eggs. And years later, I discovered, wait a minute, functional medicine, functional nutrition. There's a lot of things we can do. And
Hmm.
also, I many years ago, I interviewed someone. But the AIP diet and Crohn's and colitis, and even going on
Yeah.
that for 8 weeks, were able to go in remission. People that had experienced Crohn's and colitis for like 18 years going in remission just by making some of those dietary changes. Obviously, we got to dig deeper with gut health and the rest of
Hmm.
it.
Yep.
I'm sure you've done a lot of that work, but it's because
Yeah.
it's not about staying on that forever, right? Because it's super restrictive. But the bottom line to me, autoimmune disease and is the conventional medicine medical model just will have you chasing medications and all their side effects your whole life. Meanwhile, there's things you can do with targeted diet and lifestyle changes to reverse this stuff.
Yeah. And I was always of the opinion, I don't care what gets me better. Like I'll try anything. And so it's not that medication was out of the question. It was just most of the medication. Like I was in an immunosuppressant. And so now my immune system's suppressed, which means that reaction is still happening in my body, but we're not fixing it. And so it was good in the sense that I'm sure it helped me not have as bad reactions or not maybe not as constant. And so that gives you some breathing room. But then there's all these other factors, as you mentioned, that were pivotal in understanding and going through and eliminating and reintroducing. So it's like our body's unique, and everyone has a different way they grew up, an environment that they're in, things they've experienced, and so we have to have an approach that's more personalized.
Yeah, and the whole, obviously with the functional medicine side of things of, looking at your biomarkers and testing, but also the mental, emotional, the spiritual, all of that piece is equally as important. Sometimes people are like, "Oh, can I only do this?" And I don't want the mindset work. That's too hard. Nope, that's where you need to go for sure. Okay, and then you ended up co-founding Thea Health and sort of the CGM platform. So that's what we're going to dig in today, talking all about continuous glucose monitors, why that's so important for people that are on the fertility journey. We see that as a theme, actually, blood sugar imbalance, not necessarily. We do see people that have type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but a lot of it is pre-diabetic, and they wonder why they're having issues with ovulation or irregular cycles. They're feeling hangry and poor sleep, and then they're being pushed towards doing IVF. Meanwhile, when we start to look at our biomarkers on this, there's things we can do to make changes. So maybe just kind of share with us how you kind of got into that, into developing Thea.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was during COVID. I was part of three companies. They were great companies, still around, loved the teams. But I essentially had a moment where I wanted to do something new or next. And I've always wanted to solve as you now know, because of the pain points I've had, like one of my biggest ideas of all time that I thought about constantly was like, is there a way to track what happens in the body? Just so people know, I came from ad technology and like tracking ads and seeing how long you're on a site and what you clicked on, etc. And that technology is so good. Like I know everything somebody's doing on a platform. And then I looked at my experience in health and I was like, I had no idea. Like there was never some feedback loop. And sure, there's tests and eliminations and whatever, but you're still waiting a really long time and trying to correlate and doing everything manually. And there was just no way to know. And so I looked for, is there a way that we can action what's going on in the body? And that business, I could never start because there was never a way to get actual biomarkers from the body in a continuous format. And that all changed when I was exploring what I'm going to do, which I wanted to do in healthcare. When continuous glucose monitors got onto my radar and got declassified, they used to be extremely rare to get, and like you could only prescribe them in certain scenarios. Those got declassified. And the light bulb went off because I was like, well, hang on a second. Glucose is directly tied to your metabolic health, and your metabolic health is the ecosystem that runs your whole body, and it's tied to every single health outcome you have. And so then I thought, okay, let me try the hardware. And so when I did, I quickly noticed and realized this is well, first amazing. Like it's mind-blowing how good it is to get that data. But then I was like immediately understanding that there has to be a way to action that data, or you're going to kind of forget about it. And if you don't know how to understand it, you don't know how to interpret it. It's not easy to interpret, right? These are all the friction points that are going to come up. And so then it becomes useless because if it's just that, then it's just raw data. So my thought process was, okay, this could be the first foray into building an ecosystem where you have like an operating system or a check engine for your body, and you kind of have your vitals and you have direct access to what's going inside of you. So we said our team was thinking about how would we build a product that can make blood glucose data actionable no matter who you are. You don't have to be a diabetic. You could be super healthy. You could be somewhat healthy. You could be pregnant, not pregnant. So how do we make it so that that data is simple to understand and you can correlate what you're specifically doing to the data? And so our first kind of hypothesis was, let's go to providers and see if they're willing to adopt this technology where we can give their patients an app, and that app can be super user friendly where you log your food and your activities, and then we give you a personalized score how that did for you. And then we could send that data back to that provider and tell them in real time how their patient's doing, not subjectively, but very objectively, right? Like there's no more, how did you sleep? How did you eat? Did you log your things properly on paper? Are you lying to me, right? It's like, this is what's actually going on. And that really resonated because, going back to what was my biggest problem, yeah, like what's going on with me? Am I making the right decisions? How do I know? But B, when I go to my meetings, it's just so tedious and so time consuming, and they don't have that much time, right? Because they have to see other patients. And so it solved all these problems that we were trying to tackle. And it really, took off, and everyone's loving it because it's like, it's now irrefutable. It's always there in front of you. You can see what's going on. And it helps both the provider and the user understand what is finally happening in the body.
Yeah, to me, I think anyone on the fertility journey should consider doing this for at least 14 days so you really have an idea of what's happening with your blood sugar, even if you're saying it's in the normal range, because then we can really be able to fine tune your diet and lifestyle. And high blood sugar could be a reason why the embryo is not implanting, and then for semen it contribute to DNA damage, and then maybe that's why you're having miscarriages or pregnancy loss. So there's reasons here to be able to dig in for both partners to do this for 14 days. And so maybe just kind of, and also from trying to get pregnant, we want to prevent gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, all of
Yeah.
this piece to have like good pregnancy outcomes, because having gestational diabetes, and you can have larger babies, and then we're running into all sorts of other C-sections and other
Mhm.
health issues. So to me, as anyone on the fertility journey, being able to look at your health ahead of time is key. And then this tool, it's interesting. When I went in to see my pharmacist, I was into the pharmacist probably about maybe like a year ago, and I said, I wanted to look at a CGM. I don't have diabetes. Oh no, what's that? Why would you? No, you can't do that. Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, well, they're doing it in the States. And now with your company, you're able to get it. It's for the U.S. as well as Canada, which is good because Canada's got these freaking regulations drive you bananas. And able to have the monitor there. You don't need to have diabetes, but for me, when I did it, it was like, oh, you could sort of see specific foods that were, causing issues, and also stress and the cortisol piece. So maybe, so why is a CGM, so continuous glucose monitor, why would that be good for someone, like I just talked about, that doesn't have diabetes, and how is that going to help them, especially someone on the fertility journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So y- blood sugar is directly tied to metabolic health. So realistically, the way our platform works is we interpret what your inputs are and give you a personalized score. And that score is a metabolic score, we call it, right? And so if you eat something, we'll score it out of 100, 100 being the best. Just because we've all learned, it's user learned behavior, right? So like we've all learned since grade one, what's the best score you can have on a test? It's 100. And so if you eat something and you score a 50 out of 100, even if your blood sugar is in a relatively healthy range like day to day, it still means that that decision that you made wasn't the best one for you. And now next time you have that meal or that exercise or activity that you do or meditation, whatever it is, you can log anything. The source of truth is your body and your body's response to what you're doing to it. Right. And so now if you're eating 3, 4 times a day, you're drinking, you're exercising, you're put in stressful situations, you can now start making correlations to, hey, anytime I do this, my body's responding in a certain way. Even exercise, is it over exercising? Is it actually good for you? Are you taking a long time to recover? You can now see it because the data is continuous and it's going to tell you. And so it doesn't matter who you are, this data is invaluable because it's a direct correlation and a feedback mechanism right now, not, in 3 months when you do a blood test. It's right now, the things that you're doing right now, you can action and change them. And especially like on a pregnancy curve, you want to be in the healthiest state possible, A, to get pregnant, B, during the pregnancy, and C, post-pregnancy, right? And so we actually see a lot of pregnant women get on Thea to be able to monitor, like, is this food working for me? Is this food, timeline working for me? Like, for example, when my fiance was pregnant, she couldn't not eat in the morning. She used to not eat in the mornings. And it just became like, we looked at her data, we optimized it. She was actually hypoglycemic. And so we modified diet, work with providers, et cetera. So it was like the amount of this, you're always going to make decisions to try to get better and healthier, but if you can cut the time frame from 3 months from now to every hour, you're going to make so many more better decisions on a daily basis that are going to compound faster, right? And so that's really the draw. It's not that the tech was invented for diabetics as the first use case. Really, what we've done is made it available and easy to understand for anybody for any input that they have.
Yeah, and it's this whole personalized, nutrition and lifestyle piece. And so then, yeah, like if you're getting that hangry issues, or you're having poor sleep, or those sugar cravings, so you have the hypoglycemia or the hyperglycemia, like for sure, like if you're getting any of those symptoms, then and then also people that are waking up during the middle of the night, maybe the blood sugar is dipping. Like, what are you seeing there for people, kind of why this can be helpful? Because we see a lot of people with a regulated sleep.
Yeah, so we actually see that often in women specifically, where sugar dips or spikes high at night. And so it can be a couple of different things. A, hormones are, doing their thing, something's going on. You could have just got pregnant, or you're in the middle of it and it's a new trimester. So it's good to know, like, is my body doing something that's changing it and it's affecting my sleep? B, we've seen people undereat, so their bodies in a almost like a starvation mode where they're making their own sugar because they're like, I'm too low at night and I really need it. Like, or they're dripping too low because blood sugar is they're hypoglycemic, which is a pre-diabetic state. And so that's the opposite now, is like, what are the inefficiencies or hormones that we need to optimize to get that back to level set? So it's invaluable just to know, like, if you can make that change that day or that morning, or at least address it, then something's going on, versus you may or may not feel good, right? Like, so I think the misconception is, if you feel good, you're okay. The data shows nothing could be further from the truth, because the body's also very adaptable. So you could get to a state where you're not healthy at all, i.e., let's call it like pre-diabetic, feel quote unquote pretty good, but there's still damages being done, and over time that becomes diabetes because you were like, I quote unquote felt pretty good. So I think that's the biggest thing, is if you can do something about it.
Yeah, and some signs with a high sugar would be, so yeah, sugar or carb cravings, thirst, weight fluctuations, increased urination, which I think a lot of us know for the diabetes piece, headaches, trouble
Mhm.
concentrating, and then on the low side of it, that blurred or worsening vision, slow healing of skin wounds, frequent infections, heavy breathing, trouble exercising, tension, headaches, sweating, extreme hunger, slight nausea. So those are sort of some definite signs you've got something going on. But it is, so let's kind of go through, like, I'll just share about what from my, sorry, did you want to add anything to the high or the low blood
No,
swings?
that's perfect. Yep.
Yeah. And then, so for me, when I did it, so I don't, my blood sugar is fine. I didn't notice anything, but I did notice, because I still, if I don't have enough fats or proteins, I do notice it'll swing a little lower. And then I'm like, feeling, I used to get really like major hangry, and not so much, and just cranky, like a pain in the ass. I would say to my husband, like, stop the car now, we got to eat. And he'd just keep merrily driving along. I'm like, no, you don't get it. I got to stop. You need to stop the car now. I need to go get some food because I'm about to pass out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so major dip. I did see when I had cherries, which are in season right now, you're having lunch, that thing would just spike like crazy. To have the cherries. Obviously, if I had something, I had like it was a gluten-free, dairy-free s'more, and loaded with sugar, so that spiked. I don't eat a lot of pasta, but I could see the pasta would spike. So it's just interesting to be like, whoa, that thing like really blew
Mhm.
out the water. So you kind of know intuitively that maybe some of those foods are not the best for you. I didn't really think the cherries would be, spike it that much. But yeah, what are you seeing for people being able to customize this and being able to
Yeah.
identify what's going on?
No, it's a great point, right? And I think this is where it becomes, you become, instead of using intuition, you're using data to make those decisions. So it's like, okay, the cherries by themselves, for whatever reason, are doing that for you. So it's like, what if we combined it with other foods? So maybe we have cherries with other foods, and that's okay because you enjoy cherries. Or it could be, it was at the time of the day that you ate the cherries that made it that impact, right? And so, because all of those things matter, it's like it's you can't, I'll give this example. I was in Mexico, went out to dinner, I had I think it was 3 tacos, like the hard shell ones. They have probably about 20 grams of sugar each, essentially. It's carbs, but high fast, high glycemic sugars or carbs. And I literally, my blood sugar didn't even move. Like I was like, this is faulty. Like there's no way. So 2 days later, I went to the exact same restaurant, exact same time, exact same meal. I was diabetic for like 2 hours. And so, the first time around, if I just did that once, I would have said, this is the best thing. I can eat tacos whenever I want. I should probably only eat tacos, right? It's great for me. If I had done it only that second night, I would have said, I can never eat tacos. It's terrible for me. I should avoid. But the moral of the story was, the first night I had those tacos, I had, I think it was 12,000 steps in me, and I did a 1 hour workout right before that meal. And so my body was able to absorb those nutrients in the matter of how much activity I had. And that was fine. And then 2 days later, I looked because I had my Apple Watch. I recorded my workouts and my steps. I only had 7,000 steps in me, and I definitely didn't have a workout right before or at all that day. And so my body didn't need that fuel at that time. And so therefore it was responding in a different way. So it's not necessarily that tacos were bad for me. It was just in what context am I using them and when should I have them? And so now I know if I'm going to have tacos, the best time for me is if on a highly active day or after a workout, right? Or if I'm going to not have them those days, do I want to add some more fats or veggies to them where there's, more fiber and fats that can stunt some of that carb response. So I think the moral of all of this stuff is we don't want to have this food is bad or good for me, because then you can get into a restrictive mindset or start craving them. It's how do I make it work if I really want to? And then you start to learn over time with patterns what's working and what's not, right? And I think that's the whole point is how do we iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate and get those insights in an easy to digest manner where it's not too cumbersome for you, but fun and exciting and intuitive.
Yeah, because maybe having the cherries with some walnuts or something, or a couple Brazil nuts, or being
Right.
that, or maybe if I had of, because I usually, and yeah, so I usually will walk after lunch, and I usually do this little fruit thing after I have my lunch, and so then I walk, and then looking at the blood sugar later, it goes back to, it goes back again quite quickly, but it is like that massive spike. And so yeah, what about like for like starting the day out with, more proteins and fats so we don't get on this little side of things? Anything you're seeing there, how the CGM can help us with like that piece? Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I think, since a lot of, I mean, almost all the listeners are either looking to get pregnant or are pregnant, right? I think this is where you want to experiment. So I know there's a lot of popular diets and all that stuff. And essentially, we're trying to get to a place where you just use your body's data to make those decisions and you don't focus on a philosophy that may or may not work for you. And so, for example, we've had providers and clients play with eating windows, right? Hey, I know fasting is good for me, so I'm going to fast. Okay, well, if you're on 1,000 calories a day, doing 1 hour of HIIT cardio, and you're fasting, 18 and 6 or whatever it is, blood sugar might be extremely high no matter what you do because you don't have enough nutrients. It's trying to create its own energy, right? So that could be like, okay, maybe we put some more calories back in and eat earlier in the day and don't have a big fasting window. Or if you feel good on the fast, how long is the fast? Is it 12 and 12? Maybe it's 14 and 10, right? Like this is where you can kind of find out. And then it's like, do I do well in the morning or am I all over the place in the morning if I'm not even eating a meal? And then what does that meal entail? We've actually seen people with adding some carbs in the morning do better than not having the carbs at all. Their body's needing that extra fuel source or that sugar in that aspect. And this is where you definitely want to experiment because, like you said, we do see some correlation. It depends on the person body where they are. But if they start their day with a good habit or on the right foot, it's more likely that they're going to make the better decisions during the rest of the day. But I think the main thing is they need to have confidence that they're making the right decision because people's heads will play with them. well, I don't know if this is the best thing, so let me try this, and then let me try that, and let me try that. And it's like, which one of those was was the right choice, right? It's like whatever you read next. And I know a lot of the listeners are with you and you're guiding them, but this is gonna help them get to that sweet spot faster because they'll see it.
Yeah, because if we sometimes we're not into the fasting for people that are on the fertility journey too, because sometimes people are doing like really like lengthy fast, and then you're gonna run
Yeah.
into some problems, right? So
Totally. We've seen that a lot, to be honest. Like anybody trying to get pregnant or is pregnant, uh, having more meals has helped tremendously. And I think a lot of that is also like hormone regulation, right? And if the food's not there and the energy source is not there, because that's a period of time where like nutrition and care is very important.
absolutely, yeah. And so in the morning, yeah, having probably more protein than you think. And then the fats to be able to have you satiated so then you're not like all day long on this roller coaster. And then what about if the like with the sleep too, like sometimes you're having like a little snack before bed, like a fat bomb or something like that to keep the blood sugar stabilized. There could be other reasons why you're waking up during the night, but if you see on your CGM that it's dipping, then any strategies there to help?
Yeah, I think, there's a whole movement. They come and go, right? Like don't eat before bed, eat before bed so you're not hungry. This is going to depend on multiple factors, but we have seen, if you're needing the sustenance and you have it, we've seen it not be a bad thing. But if it's like a little bit extra just because it's a craving, then the body doesn't need it, and we've seen it spike and wake people up, right? And so and then the type of food that it is also matters. So that's gonna be an experimentation of like where's my sweet spot and what are those factors that make me sleep better. And it really actually does depend on the person.
Yeah, that's why like a couple years ago everyone I talked to was I'm doing keto, and now
Yeah.
I feel like the majority of people I'm talking to I'm doing carnivore. Which I'm like, oh man, like we're into the like this is fine tuning your personalizing a diet. We're using genetic testing too, so you can further, with all your supplements and your diet and lifestyle changes again to be able because we're every body is different, and so otherwise you're just DIYing it and guessing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And, like every single diet over a long period of time shows some deficiency in the body. So if you look at, by the way, I'll cycle keto, carnivore. Like I'll test things and I'll use my body to see, but like for example, keto, you start to see electrolyte drops and then you start to see testosterone drops. And so what's regulating that is having some form of sugars. I say sugars broadly, not like table sugar, but it could be fruit, it could be whatever, right? And it's like at some point they are necessary and the body does like them. And it could be a really long time. It could be never for some people, right? But the thing is, if you don't track and you don't know, it could start to become a detriment.
And anything else on the CGM kind of you want to highlight for people? Obviously, you've got you wear it on the back of your arm.
Yeah.
Um, it's it does there's a little teeny sting for probably about 10 seconds when you put it in, and then you don't even notice it. I do see a lot of people kind of like, oh, what do you? I had a lot of comments on people are like, oh, what are you doing? Because I was wearing it in the summertime, so
Yeah.
I was wearing sleeveless shirts and stuff like that. But people are just more interested now because it seems it's kind of gaining a little bit of traction. And people thought I was diabetic, but I'm like, no, just tracking things.
Yeah.
So more of that. So putting it on and then syncing it up with the app. There's a whole onboarding process where it's easy to sync up. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Is there anything else kind of that people need to know? Kind of, I guess the insights, anything we haven't covered?
Yeah, I think just real quick on the hardware itself. Each sensor lasts 14 days, so it's really nice because you can set and forget for 2 weeks, and just have the data streaming. They are waterproof, so you can swim, you can shower, sleep with it, etc. That's not a problem. And then I've put on probably over 40 sensors, and I'm the biggest. Like when I go to a clinic to get blood work, it's a whole ordeal. Like nobody wants to deal with me because I need like, nurses feeding me grapes and fanning me like the Greek gods. I need to be laying down. I need to be scrolling Twitter on like the most, shocking news story there is. So my mind's occupied. I need to be scratching my. So the point is like, I would never have started this company if they hurt. There's a misconception that it's a needle that goes in the arm. It's actually a filament. The big difference being the filament is bendy. So as you move your arm, it bends with you, and this is why you don't feel anything. If it was a needle, it'd literally be pricking you the whole time. In that case, nobody would wear would be wearing it full time. So I think that's kind of the overview on the hardware itself. There's going to be more hardware coming down the road, which we're exploring with many different hardware companies. And then the software side is like it's just a native app on Android or iOS. And that's where you can log your activities, see your personalized score, get weekly reports. Really, it becomes like your body becomes an interactive mechanism on your phone. And that's the part that people love, where it keeps them accountable. It shows them what's going on. They can see, the device that you're giving them as provider. Hey, that, it works. So I'm gonna keep going, because we're all forgetful creatures, right? I don't know what I ate last Tuesday for dinner. I don't, right? But if I look on my app, like, oh yeah, okay, I ate that and did really well. Okay, keep doing it, right? And so I think that's kind of the highest level overview. Outside of that, it's like just you got to try it and see your data for the first time ever in the history of time that you could, and that's the most special moment.
Yeah, and we obviously help people in the fertility journey. Sometimes people do need to lose weight, but it's not our we don't focus on the weight piece. But as you start to be able to personalize a diet, then this can really help with keeping you satiated and your blood sugar stable and seeing how stress impacts it, which then can help with
Yeah.
weight loss. Because right now I'm talking to a lot of people that are like, oh, I've been recommended Ozempic, and I'm seeing people's periods disappear after that. And we just did a podcast episode on Ozempic babies because people are taking the semi glutide there, and it's lowering the efficacy of their of birth control pill, and then they
Mhm.
are accidentally getting pregnant. We don't know that, the health of the person and things like that. But
Yeah.
this again, we can tailor our diet, potentially being able to, well, not potentially being able to see for sure how those foods impact us, and then
Yeah.
and you can make the choice for the other thing, but you actually know for sure what it's going, what it's doing to your body. And I think it's just better awareness. Otherwise, we're just got our head in the sand.
Yeah, totally. Right. And we've actually had lots of people on Ozempic go off Ozempic. So if you're transitioning into using or coming off, it's great to see what's happening in the body, right? Because it is a blood sugar stabilizer, Ozempic. It was meant for diabetics as its
Yeah.
kind of first use case. Now it's scaled out to weight loss. But just like, okay, we're getting off, we're getting on, or we're using it. Like, what are the other factors? How are they, and is it actually like good for me? Like, is my body fighting it off? Like, sometimes we see people get inflammation in their body, Ozempic aside, but anything like supplements, other drugs, whatever, they can see the inflammation because the body is just like going nuts and it's producing or reducing blood sugars like crazy. So it's good to be able to also test, supplements or like stress, like you said, or environments. And then people are now putting together some more obscure use cases are, every Wednesday, my body is just off, right? And it's like they're hanging out with a certain person that stresses them out. And so now it's funny because it was like they're catching this stuff, right? They're like, oh, like maybe I shouldn't hang out with Joe, right? It's like, yeah, Joe sucks for you, I guess. But it's I think the biggest unlock is once you have something trend lining you, like when it's showing you trend lines, then your brain starts to go, oh, okay, now I get it, right? But like if it's a one-time thing, you don't make that correlation, and that's really the biggest unlock.
Yeah, over the 14 days, you're going to get enough data to be able to make that decision. So if you need, if you've got diabetes 1 or 2, you may want to continue on, obviously, with it. But this is just to be able to in a prevention mode, especially if there's issues with with your egg quality, with embryos implanting, with the health of your
Yeah.
partner's sperm. All that is key. So we're gonna have a link to how to purchase this. It'll be in the show notes. Any final thoughts for us here, Boris?
Final thoughts, I think, just try seeing your body's data once and it'll be very eye-opening. 2 weeks is okay. I think I like to recommend at least a month. And the only reason for that is when you do get your body's data and you're trending it, the first 2 weeks, you should technically just not make any changes. And the reason is you don't want to lie to yourself, right? So if you change everything because you're seeing the data on day one, it's not a true representation of where you're at. But if you let it go for like, let's say a week or 10 days, and then you have a true representation of what's going on, and then start experimenting and see those changes, we've seen that be highly motivating and very much in line with people then like making the change and sticking to it longer because now it's their body telling them it's working.
Kind of the before and after. So yeah, that behavioral change so it can be long lasting. So it's not just this diet piece. Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Lifestyle changes
exactly.
for
Yeah,
sure. Awesome.
yeah.
Great. So we'll definitely have that link in the show notes to people can take a peek at that. And thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. I had a great time.